I am not pretending. My name is Emily Ryan Brown, and I am speaking as a Black American woman whose bloodline carries more than one story, even when the paperwork tried to erase it. In my family, like many others, the elders remember grandparents and great-grandparents who look like straight Black Indians. They remember the hair, the faces, the ways, and the words. But when you look at the documents, the story changes. Suddenly they are Negro, colored, or just Black, anything but what they knew themselves to be. That was not an accident. This country passed racial integrity laws and enforced the one-drop rule to force people into narrow boxes that protected land, power, and a false idea of racial purity. At the same time that the government was stretching Blackness to include anyone with one drop, it was shrinking indigeneity, tightening rules so fewer people could be counted as Indian. Fewer could claim land, and fewer could be recognized as citizens of their own nations. So our grandparents and great-grandparents were pushed into a corner. Many were told not to claim they were Indian, not to write it down, not to talk about it outside the family. Records were changed, identities were crossed out, and human beings became numbers that fit someone else's agenda. That is why, today, so many Black Americans say, I know we have Indian in us, and yet the paperwork calls them something else. Now we live in a time when the word pretend gets thrown around. There are real conversations about people who falsely claim Native identity for money, clout, or access, so-called pretendians. Indigenous nations have every right to protect their communities, their resources, and their sovereignty. That protection matters. But here is where the knife turns for Black Americans with Native ancestry. The same world that once erased our ancestors from the roll books now calls us pretenders. When we say what our families have always known, the same systems that force people to stop writing Indian on their records now mock their descendants for not having the right paperwork. That is gaslighting on a generational level. There is no pretending, and you know this, and you refuse to admit and speak up. It's a bad feeling to be living inside the damage that was done. When one speak up and say, my people were called Negro, but they were also Indian, or our identity was changed by law, not by choice, we are not speaking from hate. We are speaking from grief and from memory. We are defending our right to tell our own story after centuries of being told to be quiet, to pick one box, to disappear into somebody else's category. It is painful to watch the same pattern repeat. When one defends themselves from violence, they are called aggressive. When one defends our children from bullying, we are called dramatic. When one defends our history and our mixed Black and Native roots, we are called pretenders, confused, or hateful. But telling the truth about who you are is not hate. Refusing to disappear is not hate. Setting boundaries and protecting your lineage is not hate. Real hate was written into the laws that strip Native nations of land and recognition, then use the one-drop rule to mark generations of African-descended people as permanent property, permanent outsiders. Real hate showed up in massacres, in scalp bounties, and in slurs like red skins being turned into sports mascots instead of being treated as the wounds they are. Real hate showed up when governments and churches and institutions decided it was better to erase people than to honor the fullness of who they were. So today, As a Black American with Indian ancestry, I am choosing something different. I am choosing to stand in my whole story without apology. I am choosing to protect my mind from people who try to twist my truth into hatred, and to protect my heart from those who want me to be small, silent, or divided against myself. I am choosing to teach my children and grandchildren that they come from people who survive renaming, reclassification, and ridicule, and still held on to their dignity. Unity cannot be built on top of lies. You cannot ask Black Americans to come together while ignoring the ways the state deliberately split, renamed, and erased our families. You cannot preach healing while telling us our memories do not count. Healing starts with truth.
This is my closing to Congress and leaders. To the members of Congress, to senators, to representatives, and to every leader who claims to care about justice. Acknowledge the harm your predecessors wrote into law. Acknowledge that racial integrity acts, the one-drop rule, and related policies did not just sort people. They stole identities, land, and futures from both Black and Native peoples, and from their descendants who live today. Create space in hearings, in research, and in public record for Black Americans with Native ancestry to testify about what was done to their families, without being dismissed as confused or deceitful. Support community-driven efforts to recover accurate records, oral histories, and local archives so that the full truth can come forward. Here I am, are not asking for permission to exist. I stand here demanding that the country finally recognize the whole of who we are. Until that happens, the wound will remain open, not just in me or those that are similar, but in this nation's own spirit. Thank you.